I will be talking about e-commerce framework for tailored solutions, Sylius. But as this is a conference for open source practitioners, I will present you the framework, but I'll also try to share some of the lessons that I learned during my adventure with Sylius. My name is Paweł Jędrzejewski. I founded the Sylius project, and this year we transformed into Sylius company. I've been doing open source pretty much my entire adult life, and I've built an entire career on top of open source. I got my first job as a remote developer for a French agency thanks to open source. Then I started my own agency in 2014, also bootstrapped on open source. And like I said, this year we are transforming ourselves into an open source product company, and we will be also raising our first investment. And it's all done on top of open source. So while I don't have a multi-million business built on top of open source yet, I think I learned a couple of things that might be helpful if you also want to try doing something with open source. So what is Sylius? Sylius, as I said, it's e-commerce framework for tailored solutions. And the core ideas behind the product is high developer productivity, with big focus on testing. So Sylius has been built with testing in mind from day one, and actually it was built using test-driven development. A specific type of test-driven development, because it's behavior-driven development using Behat and PHP spec. I'll talk about this in a couple of minutes. But we also base Sylius as a framework, as a platform on top of well-known open source libraries. So the high developer productivity comes not only from the fact that we have finally made testing efficient, but we also use really well-known frameworks like Symfony, Doctrine, Tweak. We don't reinvent the wheel in the areas that are done better by other products. It's easy to integrate because I believe that the next big thing in e-commerce is not the platform that has more features than Magento, or includes everything from loyalty programs management to other marketing tools, reporting, analytics, powerful product catalogs. I believe the next big platform is the one that integrates with the best in category, so with the best pins, with the best loyalty software like Open Loyalty, and so on. It's cloud ready and fast to deploy, thanks to the coupled architecture and using Symfony and other well-known frameworks, and single responsibility principle. Like every aspect of Sylius is hidden behind an abstraction for the file system, for images, for pretty much every aspect of the platform. So it's easy to deploy to the most popular cloud solutions like Google Cloud, Heroku, Platformization, and so on. We have a very strong focus on APIs. Sylius has two main APIs. One is in the core. It is REST API that allows you to operate the store from admin perspective. So it's a typical REST API that allows you to create, update, and manage pretty much all entities, products, orders, customers, and so on. It's very good for integrations, for exporting, importing data, and so on. But we also recently released first version of Shop API plugin, which provides another type of API that is more suitable for progressive web apps. So you can build your store frontend with Vue.js, React, Angular, whatever front-end framework you prefer. And combined with the libraries that I mentioned at the beginning, it's much easier to learn. This is especially important for business owners because you don't need to find Sylius expert already on the market. I've seen teams with just Symfony developers who are productive from day one because it's a typical Symfony app. It's built with all the best practices from Symfony. So if you know Symfony, you can be productive on a Sylius project from day one, and it goes just not only it goes beyond Symfony itself. We use a lot of very popular libraries. So, in terms of where we are currently, according to GitHub, we are top 4 PHP e-commerce. our packages, because Sylius is built it's not just one package, it's a set of components that you can also combine. I'll talk about this in a second. We have over 4 million downloads. Over 700 people are helping us translate Sylius. Our Slack, which was launched only in December, has almost 1,000 users. And so far, in terms of code contributions, we have over 400 people, and that's really from San Diego to Nepal, Thailand, and so on. So it's really a worldwide community. Yeah. So last November we released our first beta version, because it's been a really long ride for me. I've been growing with the platform itself as an entrepreneur and developer. But when we released beta versions last November, our daily downloads almost doubled, more than doubled, and next week we are releasing finally the first stable version, so it will be safe for you to run your projects on production. While then there are shops for companies that are worth $250 million that run for like 3 or more years already on the very, very old versions of Sylius. So how Sylius looks in terms of architecture. On the very bottom, we have Sylius components, which are just plain PHP libraries that solve common e-commerce problems. So you can actually use them in any PHP application that is compatible with PHP 7.1. So it doesn't matter for you if it's Laravel, Symfony, and so on. There are some shops handling a lot of visitors that are built on Laravel using Sylius components. Examine.com is one of examples. On the second level, we have bundles. These are basically integration layers that for Symfony developers make it just a bit faster to integrate the components into your stack, because they provide you with doctrine mapping, so ORM mapping, serialization configs for APIs, service definitions for Symfony. If, for example, you want to use taxation and your Symfony taxation component to handle some tax calculations in your microservice or whatever application, if it's based on Symfony, you can take the bundle already and be a bit faster. And on top of this, we have the platform, the framework itself, which is actually just a couple of bundles that integrate everything else together. So in the version 1, we have 3 main bundles built on top of the core. We have the admin interface, we have the shop interface, and we have the RESTful API, the one for admins. And all these components are bundles that you can enable and disable as you wish. We have a really short cookbook article by just commenting out, I think, config routing and the bundle in the kernel. You can completely disable the admin interface and just use as API, like populate your product catalog through API and just sell it using the shop interface. This shop interface is based on Twig, so it's a standard server-side rendered application. And the core is just another bundle and component that actually combines everything else together. So, like I said, we have these components, let's say taxation, shipping, inventory. So when you take just a single component, shipping, for example, it helps you to manage shipping costs, shipments, but it doesn't know anything about the product catalog. So it's completely decoupled. And finally, in the core, shipment knows that it uses a product model from the product component. So this is the place where we combine when everything comes together, like promotions are connected to products, taxes, and so on. So yeah, like I said, we have these components for a lot of typical e-commerce functionalities. We also have a couple of bundles or components which are not really e-commerce specific, for easy admin generation, for easy API development, for testing, and so on. So actually, even if you don't do e-commerce apps, you can find something useful inside of Sylius as well. It's over 50 standalone packages. Yeah, so our main thing is Symfony. We basically built our community thanks to the traction that Symfony got. We were, I think, the second e-commerce on top of Symfony. The first one was Vespolina. Funny thing that Daniel, who started Vespolina, is our friend now and also works with Sylius. So, and Symfony has been a big part of our community. Like I said, we are crazy about testing, and we believe that in 2017, if you develop anything without testing, I even mean the basic testing, not test-driven development, then you're doing it wrong. We are, I think, the only big e-commerce, the only big open source project that fully embraced PHP spec and Behat. If you're wondering what Behat is, like every single feature that we have in the framework itself is described with these human-readable scenarios, but they can be read not only by humans. Fortunately, computers can also understand this. Every single step here is translated into a snippet of PHP code. And this example is about applying correct taxes on a card for someone who is not logged in, for a visitor. And these steps configure Sylius in a specific way. They basically set up countries, taxes, currencies, and so on. And then we have scenarios that actually interact with the shop. The cool thing about this is, despite the fact that every single change that we made to the core framework is tested against, I think we have over 1,000 scenarios that run against emulated browser and over 200 scenarios that run against real browser, thanks to Selenium. So this makes our development pace much faster, but you can actually use the same way, and this is the recommended way of working with Sylius. We provide not only testing inside of Sylius, we provide foundation and tools for testing your projects this way. Like when you install Sylius Standard Edition, you already have PHP Unit, PHP Spec, and Behat configured. You can just jump in according to our BDD guide and develop your first features using behavior-driven development. And I always say that Behat is a communication tool in the first place. So I bet if you are a e-commerce developer, I bet you've seen tasks where you need to implement custom promotion, and after several emails, you still have no clue how it works. By writing a very clear scenario like this, using predefined steps that we provide in Sylius already, it can be much faster and much more efficient communication. So yeah, our code quality, I think that's not the latest result. I think we are a bit better right now, I think. But compared to legacy solutions, it's completely different world. We use solid principles and single responsibility principle. I think that's at the heart of Sylius. Like every single aspect of e-commerce logic that is happening inside of the store is absolutely in a single service. You can be 100% sure that if we apply some discount, apply some promotion, calculate taxes, there's only one thing, one place in the platform where we can customize it. So I've seen scenarios where we completely change the taxation mechanism to make it simpler to configure by just overriding one service, which is responsible for calculating taxes for the card. Okay, but enough about Sylius itself. Like I said, I would like to also share a couple of lessons I learned during the adventure. I spent a couple of years building Sylius and also my career and business. So let's start with defining what open source is. My second hobby after doing business and development and technology is economics. So I like to look at open source from economic perspective. So for me, open source is a crowd of people who believe, based on the best knowledge, that they have a similar problem, and they believe they can solve this problem together by sharing some effort. And on top of that, as an entrepreneur, you can build mainly two types of businesses: service versus product. So there are open source companies who basically give away the software for free, and they work in pretty much standard agency model. So they use mainly open source as a foundation for their own projects. They share it with the community because they get some benefits, about which I will talk in a second. But basically, it's still the same type of revenue. And the second one is product, where you get like the basic open source version and paid version. This is pretty obvious. So what are challenges when you want to build a business like this? From my experience, I believe that there are a lot of, I know there are a lot of bigger projects than Sylius built with open source, but I want to share like our story. So for us, initially, especially that we have been self-funded since day one, was to keep balance between commercial work and contributing to open source. Like when you have this service model, the first one, you get revenues from selling people's work hours, like for development, consulting on or training, and you have a limited number of these hours in these hours in a month, and the company still needs to work. You need to pay the rent, you need to pay salaries, and so on. So balance between commercial work and contributing. And I talked with a couple of open source founders who have much bigger companies, and this is their impression as well. Finding the balance, like deciding, okay, I have one developer available for next 2 months. Do I put him on open source, or do I put him on a commercial project that will bring in revenue? I will give you some hints about how to make this decision a bit later when we look at the benefits that open source brings to the table. But this is challenge one. The second thing is you need to build a community, and when I talk with people who never did open source before, they're like, okay, I just put it on GitHub and it gets popular and the community like appears magically. So it's completely different. You still need to like ignite or put the first spark, create the first spark in the community, like support. This year we, for example, invested a bit of time in supporting meetups and events that are organized by people who work with Sylius. And we pretty much supported one event, and from that, a couple of other events in Spain, Germany, and a couple of other countries appeared because people saw. But you need to make the initial effort, and this is a challenge. Like community is a lot of people from different cultures, countries, time zones. Even this gets a bit complicated. The free product trap. So when I started the agency in 2014, I had little business experience, but I believed so much that open source is like the magical wand that will bring in revenues, but it's totally not true. Like the free product trap is very dangerous because the code alone won't sell. There's a lot more work to be done if you want to make money from open source. Like, of course, it's also a big investment. I think I started Sylius when I was in high school. So that was easy because I had plenty of time to work on it. But then I started working for the agency as a remote developer, and I wasn't able to use Sylius in my daily work. So I had to invest my personal time after work, over the weekends and so on. I would say only since 2014 I'm able to work full time on Sylius, and it takes a while to realize, especially for young developers who want to try open source, that you really need to think about it as a business. And I will show you a couple of things that make it a bit more efficient. So yeah, the next thing, when you release even your smallest library for converting images, people will have high expectations, even if it's free. Some people will totally not understand that they are not your customers, they are not paying you. Of course, they contribute, they invest their time, and you should appreciate them for it, but still beware that they will have sometimes very high and unrealistic expectations. And yeah, like I said, it takes time, a lot of your free time. This is an old statistic, but it's pretty much every year for anyone working on open source. And this is the tweet I like to share at my open source presentations. Like, bored with your free time, masochist, maintain a popular open source project. I think Jordi, who invested a lot of his own time without getting any money from it, the guy who created Composer, recently tweeted an email he got. The guy is like quite popular open source project, Composer, which basically is used in every single PHP project. He got an email that the guy wishes him to die in hell and burn alive because, like, yeah, the tool that he created is a nightmare and should never existed, and he should probably kill himself and stuff. So it's crazy. You get a lot of attention, and people will be mean. This one is interesting story. The source is here if you want to read more details. But if I recall correctly, this is a guy who maintained a popular small C library that is used in pretty much most of Linux distributions. And some people started collecting bitcoins to hire a hitman and get him because they were annoyed with bugs. And these were not customers. So yeah, open source can be tough, but it also has a lot of benefits. You get a lot of feedback. Like when I started Sylius project, I had no clue about like lean startup strategy, customer development, and getting the feedback and how feedback is important. But open source gives you this feedback, even if you don't expect it. So we have been building Sylius since day one, maybe initially without strong strategy how to gather this feedback, but the feedback was there, and this is one of the most valuable things, because let's imagine if you're a software company, you want to bring this next killer product to the market, you like get some investment or invest your own funds, close yourself in the office, and in 6 months you show something in 6 months, that's a good scenario actually. In a year, you show something to the people, and they say we don't want it. Like, okay, what is interesting about it? With open source, when you put yourself out there, you will get a lot of feedback for free. You don't need to hire people to test your software. You don't need to pay for this feedback. So networking and distribution. When I started Sylius, I didn't even know a single developer from my own hometown. So with open source, I managed to quickly meet a lot of interesting people. This is mainly through conferences, so I'm very happy that a lot of people are here today. It's excellent for networking and it's excellent for distribution. Like we didn't introduce our paid product yet. Like we don't have a licensed product, so this is completely free. But we launched a single page on our website, which announces the partner program, so typical partner program, and we got over 50 submissions since then. I would say more than half of them is very good quality agencies that will be able in the future to sell our products. So it's also very good for building your distribution network. Testing and Q&A. Yeah, that's exactly like feedback, but I know that with active community we release new version of Sylius, and in like 1 hour or 2 hours we already get some feedback about things. So it's kind of free Q&A, because let's say you're an agency and you build your product. Let's say you have 100 people, you can work on a lot of projects, but it will be never the number of projects that are able to test in real world scenario software compared to open source when we release new versions, and a lot of projects update immediately and provide you with feedback. Yeah, bug fixing and contributions. It is even for smaller libraries. I would say community won't build your product. I know it from my own experience, because, like I said, I started first bits of code Sylius, I know 2010, 2011, something like that. I think that's when the Sylius organization on GitHub appeared. And pretty much until end of 2015, it was community development. So I was developing some bits myself. I didn't have a team yet. The core team, like my employees who are able to work on the product. So I was just merging pull requests from community. Like this big company from London said, okay, we need search engine. We build this search engine. We pay you to merge it. Like not we pay you for consulting to get it in the main platform. I said, yeah, that's cool. But then at the end of 2015, Sylius was like, in some parts it was complete product, but in the other parts it was completely, like in a sense it was unfinished. So what you will get from open source is a lot of bug fixes, some features, but the core of the product, you need to have a team. And even for, let's say, a small library, there's always this one guy, the author of library, that works on the core, on the foundation, the core vision, and people can just contribute bug fixes and features, but they won't build your product magically. For us, it's also, and this is especially important business-wise, it's like portal for innovation, because by introducing open source at the heart of your company, people get hooked with this community spirit. So, like, initially for us, obviously, this was like a marketing engine and so on. But currently, when we are a bit more mature business, it's innovation portal. So new things like mutation testing. This all this comes from open source. We don't there's no typical R&D department, because the developers you work with, they're already crazy about open source and they constantly seek new things. And I would say most of innovation happens, maybe not most, but a lot of innovation happens in the open source field. Higher talent retention because of the community. Yeah, I mean, it's not the crucial part, but when you're a typical agency, people will leave. There's high rotation. Like, you can be 60 people company and have hundreds of people over the years rotating. Open source gives you this one benefit, that when you leave the company that is behind the open source community, you also leave the community itself. So people are very connected to not only the company, not only the business, but to the community itself. So this is a benefit for a business owner. Yeah, you will get a lot of stuff for free, so that's pretty cool. Like, by sharing with the community, a lot of companies like to advertise through supporting open source products for free. If you use GitHub, Travis CI, you know that they are free for open source, and there's plenty of other services that you can get for free: code analysis, hosting, and a lot of good stuff. So, some solutions for the problems that I mentioned. Remembering that your open source library is a product. Even if it's a small image manipulation library, it's a product. You give it away for free, but it's still a product. And I mean, yeah, maybe building a whole lean startup strategy for your small library would be an overkill. But if you think seriously about business around open source, you should treat it as a typical product and apply the same principles that you would apply for a commercial product that people need to pay for. So learn, build, measure. That's the recommended workflow, also for free products. So my perspective, I remember, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, I gave some talks about open source, and I said, like, software is good only if you open source it early enough or something like that. So I was hooked into the idea that, yeah, open source is like silver bullet for a lot of problems, but it's not. Nowadays, I treat it more as a tool from business perspective, because it's not one way of doing things. It affects the whole company. It affects pretty much every aspect of your business. So you use it for development, for R&D, for marketing, of course, for user testing, for a lot of things. But this is just like part of your strategy. Otherwise, your typical business. Include the extra effort in your time and money budgets. That's pretty obvious, but I know that initially when we started, we had these highs and lows in terms of our open source activity. Because yeah, we invested we invested a lot of time and money into open source. Then we needed to work on projects to get the money back and so on. But it needs to be a lot smoother. Like, you need to have. I'm not saying initially if you're a 5-man company, you don't have open source department, but there constantly needs to be effort on the open source side of things. Yeah, and this one is really cool. Like I said, building community is not just releasing something for free, shooting a few tweets, and then you have a community. You need to create community platforms. So you need to set rules where people need to get support. You need to set rules where they will chat. You need to set your social media channels and so on. So you kind of create a platform and then fine tune it. We basically tried different solutions for chat. We initially had Gitter, now we have Slack. Slack seems to work a lot better. So it's you need to create initially the platform for community to grow and then just fine tune it. It's not like it will appear magically. And it's with community, it's learn, build, measure. Set up new channel, announce it on your social media, and see if people are interested in using it, if they prefer this tool, and so on. Adapt based on the feedback. Yeah, so business community. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not an expert here yet because we just started building our partner network. But what I learned over the past years working with open source, that it is crucial, and it's not only about the partner network of agencies that will build business on top of your open source software, but it's also crucial to create, and this is something we will be working on in the next months, to create a true career path for individual developers. Some projects already do that. If I remember correctly, Magento has a nice page where it says, build your career on top of Magento, become Magento developer. They provide webinars and so on. So it's a crucial part of strategy to not only have this commercial ecosystem where other entrepreneurs can build their businesses around it by integrating their software, by creating plugins, themes, or whatever, but also create environment and community where people can actually invest into building the career on top of your project. And one thing I am still working on, I think I first presented it on SymphonyCon in 2016, and but I think I will finally find time after the stable release to release it, after the stable release of Sylius next week. Finally find time to describe it in more detail, but I can already show you. It's not the latest version, but if you know Lean Canvas or Business Canvas, I'm also working on something that is called Open Source Canvas. It's basically like template which you can use to evaluate your idea for open source library. So you need to think about the problems you solve, you need to think about developer segments. So it's not like, I think one trap that a lot of open source businesses and products fall into is they sell it to everyone. They create something and they say, yeah, it's good for small shops, it's good for big shops, it's good for everything, like use it. I think there's a reason behind it, because community is in a large part built on this a bit smaller developers, freelancers, smaller agencies. It's easier to build a community with them, but it's a trap. You should define business-wise, but also define from technical perspective, like who is your developer. Like the reason why Sylius is not built on Laravel is because we prefer the style of development with Symfony, with a bit more advanced architecture, with the coupling, solid principles, and so on. We are okay with spending a little bit more time initially, but then to have a sustainable platform in the long term, then to do things quick, like in Ruby on Rails, for example, and so on. But this tool, I will publish it as a PDF where you can have an empty template and fill it with your thoughts. It's not like one-time thing, it's iterations. You need to iterate on it, but it will help you to define like existing solutions, are you even better from them, and so on. Who is your developer segment, business segment, what kind of core activities you will need to perform as an open source maintainer, and so on. Okay, so I encourage you to check out Sylius stable version next week. It's on Wednesday. You can subscribe to our newsletter on the website to get the news straight to your inbox. And I hope you learned a bit today about Sylius and doing open source. I hope some of you will start your own open source project. It's a lot of fun. Especially the community part. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be here for the whole day, so it's not like the last chance to talk. I'll be very happy to answer. Thanks.